If you're someone who struggles with self confidence, then today's episode is for you, my friends. Rich Mitchell specializes in helping people increase their self confidence, even when it feels like they don't have any. In today's episode, we will cover self confidence and how it is developed, qualities of a self confident individual, the difference between arrogance and self confidence, what will actually deteriorate your self confidence, and how self confidence looks different between men and women. Welcome to the Reframe, where fear is brave. Here, you will learn tools, techniques, and strategies to get back in the driver's seat of your life again. I am your host, Rebecca Molman, trauma therapist turned podcaster and course creator. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Richard, it is an absolute pleasure to have you here today. And I really look forward to this conversation around self confidence and what it looks like, how it's developed, what it looks like, and how we can build more self confidence. Could you just introduce yourself a little bit so people have an idea of who you are and how you came to work with self confidence?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, my name is Rich Mitchell. I'm a life coach, and I work with people who want to build their self confidence so they feel great about themselves and great about their future. I come from a place where of very little self confidence. So, when I was in high school, I had very little self confidence. I went to college and had it was like they took any self confidence and took it away. And then as I progressed through my life in the military and I directed bicycle tours, and that was when I really had the self confidence that I needed when I was doing the bicycle tours. And then I became a teacher, and that my teaching waned. And then when I became a parent, then the self confidence goes way up and way down. Like the huge roller coaster. So I came to the work of helping people with self confidence because I know how it feels to live without it, and I know how it feels to live with it. And living with it is way better. And
Yes.
so I'm trying to make sure I help people with that because I know that people, everyone wants more self confidence, but the way I help people is to help them find it, find what they want in life, and then build the self confidence toward that thing, that goal.
So, what would you say as far as self confidence and where it comes from? Is it something that's inherently comes comes with the package, or is it something that you need to develop? Like, what creates it? And then also what makes it wane, like you were talking about, kind of that roller coaster of self-confidence?
Sure, sure. So I mean, the first answer is that it's absolutely something that can be developed. That was a huge aha moment for me when as I reflected. Now, this was all I'm trying to help people get to this, in their life now, as opposed to waiting until 15 years after they really needed it. But the idea that I was able to find the self confidence and then learn how to build it even more effectively through my life coaching. Like I said, when I was in the military, I was okay with self-confidence. When I was working with Cycle America as a bike tour director, I had plenty of self-confidence. I felt great about myself, but I didn't really know why. And so as I got older, I was able to pinpoint it, and it really was looking at my accomplishments and figuring out what I had done in my life. And sometimes if you compare yourself to one person, you might think like, well, what the heck have I been doing with my life? Like they've done all this other stuff. And then other people, you're like, man, I've really crushed it thus far. And so you have to meet yourself where you are and then figure out where you want to go in the future. And so building self-confidence is really taking a look at what you have done in your life and using that as a base of confidence. Confidence comes from it's like your past, right? It comes from what you've done, and self-confidence is based on that confidence so you can trust yourself to do things in the future. So you can bet on yourself. I always like to say, like, I'll always bet on myself. There's nothing in
Mm.
the world that if I set my mind to it, I will take care of it. And because I know myself and I know I'm accountable to myself and I know how to do that, and it's all through the building of self-confidence.
Well, like you mentioned before, like going into parenthood, right? How would somebody have self-confidence going into something that they have no history with? It's a brand new thing. It's kind of scary. It's a lot of responsibility. How would you encourage somebody to find that self-confidence and that when they're walking into something so new?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question. I haven't really thought about it in that term because that's such a high stakes it's such a high stakes thing to be a parent because
Mhm.
you can't you don't want to screw it up, but then it's impossible not to on grand scales, right? Like being a parent, you do that every day, and so that's a really interesting question because I don't know. I think I would really encourage people to look around them and realize like people are parents, right? Like that the whole idea of humanity or the whole way the species stays intact is that people become parents. So
Mm.
that's one thing that you can say, okay, well, I might not feel great about it, but like people do this. And then and it all again, it kind of all goes back to, well, this was a new thing and this is something I got thrown into. And they say that there's never a good time to have a child. You just have a child. You can prepare all you want, but ultimately, you're never truly prepared for it. And so that's where that waning or that the wave is. There was a day a few weeks ago where my boys they wanted to play outside in the rain, and usually I would say no. Like usually I would just tell them no because I don't want to give them more baths and everything like that. But that day I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And they went scrambling around in the rain. And then I'm watching them thinking I should go out there and do it with them. And usually I would just make an excuse not to. And I was like, who cares? So I went out there and it was like the greatest thing ever. And it was just that moment. So that day, that was a really high point in my life of parenting. But there's so many low points that, you're just like, well, what do I do? I don't know how to handle that. And that's why overall, you have to build that self-confidence so that you're okay handling the low points and you're gonna get to the high points.
I wonder if it also would be a piece of looking back, even though you don't know whether it's parenting or something else, you're walking into new territory. I wonder if self confidence comes not necessarily from absolutely knowing all the skills necessary for the thing that you need to do, but it's knowing that you can figure it out, right?
Mhm.
That you've figured other hard things out before and you're pulling that into a new circumstance.
Absolutely. That's where that base of confidence comes in. So what I teach my students, and this is what I was taught, is to create a list of accomplishments and look at and write down 25 things that you've done. And it could be from, I passed a test to, I graduated from college to whatever. Major accomplishments, minor accomplishments, and laying that down and then saying, okay, if I could do this, then I can do this. If I could get this job, then I know I can get this job because I built these skills and therefore I'm able to do this. So that base of confidence then becomes the support, the structure that you need in order to say, I've got this. Like I bet on
Mhm.
myself. I'm gonna go and take care of this. I'm gonna take a risk, but I know myself, and therefore I know that it might be wavy, like it might go in and out, but I'm gonna take care of it because that's who I am and I'm accountable to myself.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So, one thing I've seen with clients, and I'd be curious to see how you approach this, is even if they're able to come up with that list, even if it's a short list, right? There's maybe three or four things on it, and they're good things, they're solid things to be on that list. But there's this underlying belief that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'll never succeed, all those belief systems, because it feels like those need to be addressed also because they don't believe in the list they just wrote.
Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah, the accomplishment log comes from a place of factual things, but getting someone to build upon that list. They say, "Well, I haven't really done anything," like, I haven't done anything important." I'm not talking about important things like, you're gonna get recognized nationally. I'm talking about you passed a test, right? You got your driver's license. So in order to do that, you had to study for a written exam. You had to get in front of have you had to one of your first driving experiences is with a police, officer in the car with you. Like, so that takes a lot of confidence and settledness in your mind and then you build that into the person's understanding of themselves. And then you say, like, I built the skill of driving, which is important, but I also built the skill of understanding my surroundings and interacting with a police officer. There's skills that come with those. So it goes accomplishments, and then from those accomplishments, you listen and you think about the skills that you've built, And then you look at the personality traits that have developed. So once you
Hmm.
have the personality traits, you can say, I love this about myself. I love the fact that I'm patient. I love the fact that I can sit next to a police officer and be okay, right? Whatever the word for that would be, right? Like self-awareness maybe. So you and then as I'm listening to someone, I'll start pointing out to them, well, self-awareness is a very like a key factor in your life. This is what you've done because of self-awareness. All that after you say all that though, the it is really important sometimes you have to build someone up into that list. And sometimes there's a lot of other things going on, right? Someone might be financially, a wreck financially, and so that colors anything they have to do with self-confidence. Because of whatever situation, like they just can't seem to even bother with self-confidence. It's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like they don't have that safety or that structure, and then so confidence is like it's a luxury for them. So building that, helping them build that into their lives and understand that they can get the things they want, they can meet the goals that they want, but it's going to take some time, some more than others.
Yeah. Do you think that self confidence looks different on men versus women, or people that identify a little bit more with a masculine versus a feminine state?
Yes, I think they're absolutely different animals, or they can be different animals. I think, in my experience, has taught me that the self confident male is often less confident. They sort of have the chest bumping self confidence where they just kind of fake it because that's what they have to do. Whereas I would imagine, and my mix between my experience and imagining, that a woman who's comes across or has self-confidence is someone who actually has self-confidence, because it's much harder in our society for a woman to portray that and be okay with portraying that. Like
Mm.
often a woman who has self-confidence might feel that they need to hide it because of the way things actually work in society. As much as we don't like to talk about it, like that's something that we have to help alert people in society, like the fact that this is happening, right? It's 2023 and we're still having the same conversation that we've been having for, 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So that's
interesting.
that's an aside, but you understand, like my what I'm trying to say is that it definitely comes through in different ways. But I would say it's almost like a male that's really portraying a lot of self-confidence might not actually have it. It might be more like they have to fake it till they make it kind of thing.
With with that, actually, faking it till you make it, fake it till you make it. Is there a component to that of developing self confidence where is there a fake it till you make it piece, or is there another aspect that is important?
I think for sure, that goes along with the I'll always bet on myself, right? Like I can say like I'm gonna go out and do this thing, and I believe it wholeheartedly, but I also have to, like, if something comes back, if something goes wrong, I have to sort of defend myself against the imposter syndrome, right? Like maybe something goes wrong and I'm like, "Oh man, this is totally not what I should be doing, and I really shouldn't have even started this." So there's that, but no one else knows. You have to get over your own self, and I think that's sort of the way to combat the imposter syndrome, because neither are true, right? The
Mhm.
imposter syndrome, you if someone goes into a job and they've been hired for a job and they get to the job and they're thinking like I shouldn't have gotten this job. Like I just don't belong here. Well, what I would tell that person is that like the people hired you. Like they went out, you applied, you got hired, and they want you here. They want you to succeed. And there's a learning curve. That's fine. But if you're unable to accept the learning curve, then you have to reel it back in and say, and you have to go back to the fact that people sought you out. I mean, I've worked with people that have a company actually built a position because of their personality, and they wanted that person in, and it was really hard for them to come to terms with that and say like, I don't know if I can be doing this job, but they've built the job for you.
There's that. It sounds like a lot of what you're doing is opening perspective for the person so they can see not only their accomplishments, but the layers to it and also the characteristics that are being developed and inherent within the person. And I think that leads to those personality traits. What would you say some common personality traits that you see in people that are self confident?
I, I certainly think self-awareness is one.
Hmm.
The emotional intelligence it takes to be self-confident is another, but I think a lot of it has to do with I equate emotional intelligence a lot with self-awareness and being able to understand your strengths, understand your weaknesses, be okay with going after and building your strengths and maybe leaving the weaknesses to someone else. You can build the weaknesses enough to be dangerous and do the things that you want to do, but focus on your strengths and that'll bring your weaknesses up, just by proxy. So self-awareness, I would say another personality trait is openness to new adventures,
Mm.
open-mindedness, growth mindset for sure. It takes a lot to have growth mindset in terms of self-confidence because growth mindset leaves you open to failure. You if you have a growth mindset, that means you're putting yourself out there and you're gonna fail, and that's okay. You're gonna make mistakes. The old adage of well, the new adage of failure is learning, learning a learning opportunity, but it really is. But you really have to take a step back and look at it that way. And sometimes it takes training to tell yourself that I made a mistake there and that's okay. Is it takes a lot of training. That's not how we're built in society. It's not how schools
Mhm.
teach us to work.
So, from your own experience as well as with your clients, what would you say is the thing that will deteriorate self when someone has self confidence? Because it does go through cycles and waves and it tends to peak
Mhm.
and valley. What is one of the things that will deteriorate someone's self confidence, even if they've had it and then something happens and then they have low self confidence? What happens there?
Mhm. I think certainly if someone is worried about what other people think,
Mm.
and that's it's easy to say and it's easy to tell your kids like don't worry about what they think. It's not about what they think because it is. Like there's no denying that that really has an impact. But if you fall victim to that, if you're concerned about what are people going to think? What do people think of what happened? What do people think of what I did there? That's gonna deteriorate your self-confidence because they do think, this idea that no one's paying attention is I don't think that that's correct. I think that people do think about it, but you're like someone's ability to be okay with that and to reckon with that, whatever happened, you're the one that has to deal with it, and the other person doesn't have to deal with it. They just have to look and watch and say and like make comments. And so if you can be okay with that, your self-confidence is gonna be a lot more difficult to take away. And no one can take your self-confidence away, but you can really give it away pretty easily if you don't monitor yourself when something like that happens.
Ooh, I love that. But you can give it away. But they can't take it away, but you can give it away.
Right, right. But you give so much space in your brain to what other people, what other people think and what other people wanna say, and they're not the ones that put themselves out there. I think a lot of times people that have something to say they're not the ones that are taking the risk, or they're not the ones that are willing to put themselves out there to
Mhm.
do this.
So, with being a father and having how old are your kids, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure, my daughter's 13.
Uh-huh.
She's in 8th grade as of Monday, and my boys are 8 and 6. So they're in 3rd grade and 1st grade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So, how have you applied this with raising your own kids? I'm kinda curious on how because I think we can instill these things, these
Mhm.
mindsets, these perspectives in our kiddos as well, so they have a stronger foundation moving into adulthood. What are some things that you use with your kids?
To teach them or to
Mhm.
help me?
To
Well,
teach them.
yeah, to teach them, I really focus on the growth mindset. And it's interesting, and I was gonna use this as an example before, but now you've kinda teed it up for me. So my boys are starting baseball, and it's something that, we've been playing out, we've been throwing the ball and catching and batting and stuff like that, just, like, having fun. I We have a little patch of grass outside, I call it the field of dreams because all we do is play sports. We kick the soccer ball, we do all that stuff out there. So we got to the field of dreams, and to the point that they're like, "Can we go out to the field of dreams and play catch?" And so but what's very interesting to me is that if they don't catch the ball, if they swing and miss, if they trip or someone steals a soccer ball from them and they have to run back, they will tell themselves, "I suck." Like, they'll be like, "I suck at this." And drawing, like, everything that they do, there's this sense of, like, "I stink at this." And it's really hard for me to say. I mean, it's not hard for me because my initial thought is like, "Don't say that." But it's more than that, and I know that telling someone don't say that is not gonna be helpful to them. So, trying to figure out how to help them understand that it's okay to fail without you can't tell a six-year-old that it's okay to fail because it's not for them, and it's not for most people, right? But when you're trying to develop that skill, I just find it interesting that, like, as much as advanced as we are in terms of the way we talk to our kids, there's so much stuff that's inundating them with they're supposed to say, "I stink at this." Like, you're never supposed to say you're good at it. You're never supposed the way I'm talking, it's still uncomfortable for me to, like, talk about how I'm self-confident because it's almost like I'm not supposed to be. Supposed to brag about being self-confident. I'm supposed to kinda hold it in and hope that no one figures that out because there's a difference between arrogance and self-confidence. But back to my kids, it's really, really difficult to watch that and to be a having been a teacher and having been such a proponent of growth mindset, and then hear them say those things and try and you don't have there's really nothing, not that there's nothing you can say, but it's really hard to remember, like, say yet. I'm not good at this yet. Or, and it's like they're
Mhm.
like, stop it with that. They're not interested in hearing that. So it's a lot to consider.
Yeah. Mhm. Can you talk a little bit more about the arrogance versus self-confidence so people have an idea of like, arrogance maybe being the shadow side of self-confidence, right? Where it's inappropriately used. Can you differentiate the 2?
Yeah. So the way I describe it is that arrogance, like self-confidence is built from the inside and
Mhm.
you use your self-confidence to bring others up. Arrogance, you're stepping on people to bolster yourself. So a self-confident person is bringing people up and showing them how they are, beautiful in their own lives and they can be self-confident as well, as opposed to an arrogant person who might be trying to make sure that the other person doesn't catch up to them. So they're kind of putting them down in order to continue to feel good about themselves.
Mhm.
And that's
Absolutely.
something I talk to my clients about. I talk a lot about interview processes. And
Mhm.
when you go into an interview, when you're writing your resume, so many people say, like, I don't want to brag. It's like, well, if there's any time to brag, like now's the time. Like this is your opportunity. You got to tell them what you can do and what you've done. And so there's a lot of coaching in that. People are they don't want to say it all because they're concerned that they're going to come across as arrogant. And job interviews are the thing that it's uncomfortable to start talking about all the things that you've done because people aren't used to doing that.
Mhm. Well, I think that goes back to what you were saying as far as culturally, say women haven't been able to feel comfortable or have had to really fight for being confident in their own skin to be able to have their own voice. And it does feel awkward to share your successes or to share your strengths because I think just speaking from a woman's perspective, my first gut reaction is I don't want to make anybody else feel smaller than but that's never the intention. And I can't control how other people are going to respond at all.
Right. And yeah, there's ways of I think at a certain point you just have to let people go. If in terms in those terms, if they're concerned about you being self-confident and they're not seeing that it's a good thing for everybody that you're self-confident, then that's something it's almost like you have to cut your losses and not talk about that with that person. Not that you have to, like, jettison them as a person, but just just understand that, like, well, I'm not going to be able to convince them. There's really no reason to talk about it. And I just continue to do my thing. And if they come along, then great. If not, then maybe they resent you for a little bit, but that's
Mm.
okay.
Richard, could you take us through a case study of sorts where you could take someone that you worked with from the beginning and how the transformation for them happened and what it looked like on the end?
Sure. Well, so I don't believe that there's an end. I'll just say that, like, right off the bat, like, that's a that again, it goes with the growth mindset. So, the and I'm the same way. Like, I have a coach, and I'm constantly not constantly, but I do talk about self-confidence. There's other stuff that I talk and, business and all this kind of stuff. So, the person I'll talk about is he started out with me, and he was just very shy, and he was in a job, he was, like, in an internship, but he was a professional. Like, he had the degrees and stuff, it just hadn't transferred over to a full-time job, and he really thought it was his fault, and he
Mm,
wasn't and it wasn't his fault, but he needed to it could have, like, lengthened due to him because he wasn't going out and doing the things that he needed to do in order to get the job. But that's where I come in as a coach, right? He came to me concerned about his ability to get this job or get a new job, and that was my job to help him understand that he could do that. And eventually he did, but there's like now that he's in the job, there's a lot of concerns with, is he doing it right? And is he doing it properly? And what does this person think? And just the other day I was talking to him about making sure he asks questions. And if he's got a question, you got to ask, because otherwise you're going to continue to have that question, and someone's going to think that and then you're gonna really mess something up, and that's gonna be a lot more
mm,
detrimental, right? And so he was able to get that job, and that's been great, and he's improved a lot, but he still has a lot of work to do,
mm.
and that's okay. Like, that's where if you go back to the question of, is it innate or is it learned? I think I think it's always learned. It's just a matter of when you're taught from the very beginning. If you're taught, or the examples or whatever line up so that you feel like you've always had the self-confidence, then that's one thing. But if you might have graduated from college and like me and had so little self-confidence, and so which comes with like self-hatred, and there's all these
Mhm.
depression and anxiety.
Mhm.
It all comes down to self-confidence, in my opinion. And it takes a lot to get out of that. So the more ingrained you are with in not having self-confidence, the more difficult it is, but the work is there and you can do it.
I think something else it that you're touching on also is that it has layers, that there's layers to what that self-confidence looks like. And once you almost like you've gotten like the guy getting a job, right? And then there's something else, right? Something else to push you, something else to develop an inner strength
Mhm.
that you have opportunities to address, I suppose.
Right, right. Yeah, and that layer idea is really key, because the way I teach my clients is when someone comes to me and they say, "I want more self-confidence," that's not enough. We have to know why. Like, are you going for a new job? Are you upset because, you wanna find a partner in life? Do you wanna have the ability to make the money in order to buy a car? Whatever it is, I have them I require them to have something. And even if they have to make it up, even if they have to take a week and be like, "Okay, well, I don't really know what he's talking about, but this is what I'll say." Because you have to have a goal. You have to have a North Star in order to point yourself to it. Because once you have that North Star, if it's the job interview, I come back to the job interview because everyone's been through it. And yeah. So once you have that North Star, then you can say to yourself, okay, these are the steps I have to take in order to get to that job, in order to get to that job interview, and ultimately get the job. So that's the first thing, is making sure they have something to build towards. Because otherwise you're just puttering around, and there's not that there's no point, but it's way harder to build because you're not building toward anything in particular.
More ambiguous, it would
Right.
seem.
Right.
Well, in self-confidence, it requires it's a skill that you're building, like you've mentioned a couple times, but it needs to be applied to something,
Right.
I
Right.
think, to be effective.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when it all boils down to it, if someone is like, I don't know why I want self-confidence. I just know I want self-confidence." What I ask them to do in terms of the accomplishments, and then in setting goals, is to build $1,000 into $1,000 into your life that wasn't there. And so give them 3 months and say, "All right, I want you to save $1,000." $1,000 puts you out of your comfort zone, it sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Some people they could do it in a drop of a hat. So I tell them, okay, $5,000. You want to
Mhm.
be a smart aleck. Okay, fine. $5,000. Or if it's 500, whatever feels like makes you a little bit nauseous to try to do that. And then taking 3 months to do that. And then at the end of the 3 months, if you've saved more money, if you've saved close to $1,000 or you've saved over it, then that becomes an accomplishment. So you're saying that you haven't done much in your life, but now you've saved $1,000 because you said you were going to. So now you put that in your base of confidence and say, okay, well, I could do that. Then I can do this. And so but I make them say, okay, what do I want to buy with my $1,000? Because it goes back to, like, you can't just save $1,000 just for the sake of it's much harder to save $1,000 than for no reason. Then you
Mhm.
can always have a reason, right? Like, I want to buy a new guitar, I want to have a down payment on a car, whatever it is. So that kind of takes care of that. Like, I've never done anything and I don't have a reason to have self-confidence. And it's fun, right? Who doesn't want more $1,000? Who doesn't want $1,000 extra in their lives?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard people talk about in building self confidence also breaking it down to small things. Did you make your bed this morning? Did you set the goal of drinking more water and you succeeded at that? But sometimes parsing it down to what is manageable for that person. Like you talked about depression earlier. Sometimes the success is the shower. Like you got in the shower.
Mhm. Yeah, you got out of bed.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's the fun of my job, for lack of a better way to say it. That's the pleasure I get in terms of, like, helping someone that can barely get out of bed to get to the point where they're doing the thing that they really want. I need to say something, so this is what I wanna say. And then if they truly believe that and that's their why, then they'll slowly build to that. And each of those milestones, like you said, I do backwards planning. So the $1,000, right? So what's today? August 30th. So let's say November 30th, right? That's 3 months. November 30th, you want $1,000 extra in your bank account. So now you have to, from there, you have to say, okay, well, what do I need to do to accomplish that? And so in mid September, you might gather a bunch of stuff to sell and sell it on Facebook Marketplace. And there's $150. So now you're down to, seven or 850. And then at the end of September, you create a side hustle and you start building on that. And by November, you've got that $1,000 instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do this by November and then not having any plan or any structure toward it. And then you get to November and you're like, well, that didn't work, and you might have like $100 more, or you might have 1,000, but it's way easier if you have those steps toward that.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between motivation and discipline for listeners? Because I think what you're doing is you're asking people to do things that oftentimes they don't want to do. Like they may want the $1,000, but those steps in between don't
Mhm.
sound bright and shiny, and they are, may not want to do those steps.
Right.
Could you just talk a little bit about how you would encourage somebody who doesn't want to go through those smaller steps?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is that you came to me for a reason, right? You're here, so I'm not going to tell you what to do, but my job is to help you see and help you pull the wisdom out of yourself so that you know what you need to do. Because there's a lot of ways to make $1,000 that I have no idea, right? Like, I would never think of. I would always go back to, you came to me for a reason. And that's why, like, I love my course and the course is great, but, like, it really comes down to working one-on-one to get that coaching and sometimes, yeah, I have to kick them in the butt and get them moving. And remember, like, this is why you came to me. I'm not here to, like, coddle you. I'm here to help you help yourself. So your question, discipline versus motivation, it's both. They go hand in hand. There's not one leads to the other. You have to be motivated to do something in order to have this self-discipline to continue on that path. You have to have the self-discipline in order to motivate yourself to do something. But again, it's always that thing at the end. There's always something that you need to have as your North Star in order to have motivation or self-discipline.
That makes sense. Something to tether that all into place.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the 5-week program that you have. It sounds really, really amazing.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a video coaching course where the idea, like you in week one, we go over the fundamentals and just sort of the mindset of self confidence, the mindset of always betting on yourself. What I'll say to your audience is that this was the thing that changed my life, which is your thoughts create your results, but you get to choose your thoughts. And that was the thing that really resounded, or, sounded with me, resonated with me. And that's through, the life coach school where I got certified. And once I realized that, I was able to, I mean, everything opened up for me. Like I just was able to do whatever I wanted to, knowing that I could choose whatever it was that I wanted to think. And a lot of times, I mean, honestly, like a lot of times it doesn't feel that way. A lot of times it's really hard to remember that you get to choose your thoughts. But I learned that, so that's an important thing. So I always will come back to that. So that's like that first week, and then we talk about the accomplishment log. We build that accomplishment log, and then we do SMART goals where we go through the $1,000, and I really coach hard on that and figuring out like apartments and whatever your particular interest is, and then accountability and making sure that you're accountable to yourself so that you can do the things you want to do. Because if you're trying to do something and you don't do it and then you lean back on yourself and you're like, well, I failed at that because I didn't hold myself accountable, then you've lost a lot of self-confidence. Like we talked earlier about how it goes down. That's another way that it goes down. When you say you're going to do something and then you try to hold yourself accountable, but you don't do it, and then you feel doubly worse because now you don't have the accountability and you don't have the thing that you set out to do. And so all that blends into that self-confidence. And it really is, it's a it's a skill that you get from the course. So it's a lifelong skill that you get by going through the course. And I have not I hate the word exercises, but I have tasks that I want you to
Mhm.
do each week in order to keep up with the program. And then with that, we also have a group coaching call. So every week there's a group coaching call where you can jump on, see what other people are doing, keep motivated, ask me questions, just to kind of maintain your sense of movement toward whatever it is that you want to do.
Mhm. Good. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, in closing, if you're going to share one thing with someone who, when you, when really the person that you were when you didn't have that self confidence, what would be the number one message that you would share with him?
That's a great question. I think when I so I've done this for my future self to who I
Yeah.
am now. Um and when I've thought about my past self, it always kind of comes down to, like, you thought it was such a big deal and it really wasn't, you know. Um but I would say that I would help myself listen to people that are trying to tell me that it doesn't have to be this way. You don't have to be sad and depressed. There's ways out of it. So that's one thing. And then really paying attention to the things where to the moments when things were going really well. And I can identify several in my life that were just, I call them peak moments. I used to direct bicycle tours, so bicycle tours across the United States. And I was in the I don't know, I don't remember where I was, but we were in a gym and I was walking from one side of the gym to the other, and I was on my way to do something, and I remember thinking, like, I'm on top of the world. Like, I love everything about what I'm doing. I'm riding my bike, I'm meeting people, like, all these people are depending on me to help them get where they're going, and I just was like, I was so in love with my everything about my life. And I know there are more moments like that, but that's the one I remember, and I would want myself to really pay attention to not only those peak moments, but the moments where I could have used the moments to build upon to build for myself into, where I am now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing all of your incredible knowledge.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please leave a review and share on your social media. or share this episode with someone that you know would benefit from hearing or watching this. It helps bring this content to more people that need to hear it the most. And as always, may you be the change you desire to see in the world.